70 years ago, the General Assembly and the United Nations made two promises to the world. The first was to create a free, independent, and sovereign state of Israel. The promise was fulfilled. And now we can glance at Israel's seat, and we can see them as full-fledged members of our organization. The second promise, Mr. President, was to create a free, independent, and sovereign state of Palestine, unfortunately, was not fulfilled. We're talking about more than 70 years of an unfulfilled promise in not allowing the creation of the state of Palestine. We're talking about more than 50 years of Israeli occupation and of a continuous growth of settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. And we're talking about more than 10 years of the inhuman blockade against Gaza. As a result, I would like to make a very important clarification in order to understand one of the reasons why we are here today. Even though there are two parties to this poorly named Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I would like to state clearly that this is not a conflict, but rather a situation of illegal occupation, where there is an occupying power and an occupied territory, a situation where both parties are not on an equal footing. Israel is the occupying power, and the other party, Palestine, is the occupied people and territory. In other words, Israel is an oppressor state, and Palestinians are an oppressed people. Of course, there is an undeniable and historic inequality to all of this. One of the parties constantly resorts to force to occupy the territory of the other. The Palestinian population is living in a state of siege by the occupying power of Israel and its defense forces, and this occupation undoubtedly is the greatest obstacle to the protection of the lives of thousands of civilians who are not only Palestinian but also Israeli. One of the parties has built checkpoints in occupied Palestinian territories, forcing this population to live in constant fear. One of the parties, the occupying power, has built an annexation wall along the West Bank as part of its settlement policies and expansionist policies. A wall which, by the way, was declared illegal in 2004 by the International Court of Justice. One of the parties is responsible for the building of illegal settlements in Palestinian territory, in the other territory. One of the parties is responsible for preventing the return of more than 6 million Palestinian refugees to their homes. And allow me to repeat this sentence. One of the parties is responsible for preventing the return of more than 6 million Palestinian refugees to their homes. One of the parties is responsible for the detention of hundreds of Palestinian boys and girls. One of the parties is also responsible for Gaza to be in a state of siege and blockaded by sea and by air, and doesn't have the basic services such as drinking water nor electricity. One of the parties is responsible for the illegal occupation of territories that don't belong to it, and also responsible for the forced displacement, for the confiscation of fertile land and water, for the demolition of Palestinian homes, for the transfer of settlers to illegal settlements built in Palestinian territories. One of the parties has been applying a collective punishment against the other. Mr. President, roughly 2 years ago, my delegation, my country, was elected by this General Assembly to be a member of the Security Council of the United Nations. We took on this responsibility, convinced that in being part of this organ, we would contribute with the right to the right of the Palestinian people to live in peace in the territories that historically belong to it, and without any threat Unfortunately, we didn't manage to even come close to this aspiration. On the contrary, during the months of our tenure on the Security Council, the situation of the Palestinian people has worsened further, and the government of Israel has stepped up its horrific policies against the Palestinian people. And in other words, I must state as well that the Security Council has failed in trying to resolve the situation of Palestine. And there is one fundamental reason for this, the fact that Israel indirectly has the right of veto through one of the permanent members of this council. Throughout these 2 years, two facts have struck us and drawn our attention. One of them is the unilateral decision of the government of the United States of America to establish its embassy in the occupied city of Jerusalem. An attempt by the Security Council to condemn that illegal act was impeded by a veto from the United States. And this, along with what happened on the 1st of June, when the United States once again vetoed a draft resolution whose main aim was to provide protection to the Palestinian people, which was being then massacred by the Israeli occupation forces. Unfortunately, that draft resolution was also vetoed by the United States. Mr. President, regrettably, in history, the role of the United States of America and its policies in favor of the systems of unjust governments which violate human rights is nothing new. And here I'm going to go back to a sentence which was delivered by the prominent U.S. activist, linguist, and philosopher Noam Chomsky in an article where he referred to the support that the United States provides to the occupying power of Israel. And Chomsky said, and I'll read this in English.
Porque hace una comparación muy interesante.
It's a very interesting comparison between the support that the U.S. gave to Israel and the support that the U.S. gave to the apartheid regime in South Africa. Chomsky says,
there is one comparison to South Africa that is realistic and significant. In 1958, South Africa's foreign minister informed the U.S. ambassador that it didn't much matter if South Africa became a pariah state. The UN may harshly condemn South Africa, he said, but as the ambassador put it, what mattered perhaps more than all other votes put together was that of the United States, in view of its predominant position of leadership in the Western world. End of quote. For 40 years ever since it chose expansion over security, Israel has made essentially the same judgment. Es decir, que no importa que
in other words, it doesn't matter that the other members of the Security Council were in favor of something. It doesn't matter what is decided by this General Assembly through the 20 resolutions which were mentioned by the distinguished representative of Israel, or the 5 special emergency sessions that have been convened in this chamber. Because in actual fact, what matters is the support and the diplomatic cover provided by the United States, the economic and military support of the United States in order to maintain the system of occupation of Palestinian territory, that system which violates international law. Mr. President, on this occasion, once again, we express our firm commitment to all of the international efforts which lead to a peaceful solution to the situation of occupation which is being experienced by the Palestinian people. In this respect, we support initiatives such as the Quartet Roadmap, the Madrid Principles, the Arab Peace Initiative, and others that are guarantees for a just and lasting peace so that both peoples can live within recognized and secure borders. We reaffirm our conviction that the only solution, the only long-term solution to the situation of occupation experienced by Palestine is the two-state solution. where we would consolidate a free, sovereign, and independent state of Palestine with the pre-1967 international borders and with East Jerusalem as its capital, in accordance with the Security Council resolutions as well as resolutions of this Assembly. And lastly, Mr. President, I'd like to point out that my delegation will honourably co-sponsor the draft resolution which we are voting on today. We know that some delegations would like to make a list of who is in favour or who is against, but we also have to recall that history takes precedence over lists, and just as important as history, our own conscience trump lists. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the plurinational state of Bolivia.